Well, hello, folks. This is Bob Ferguson, and I have with me today my friend, Dr. John Ikerd. John and I have spent quite a few years working together and thinking together and talking together about what makes a great society, what makes an effective economic system. And John is a world-renowned agricultural economist, a really fabulous deep thinker. And in this political moment where there was so much heat, such a phenomenal amount of disinformation, misinformation, malinformation, that it's really hard for the average person to come to any kind of a understanding inside of themselves as to what is happening, and maybe even more to the point, what should happen. In the political moment, we all choose the side that feels right to us. But I love to get into the depth of something and understand the mechanics of what I'm talking about. And when we're talking about political and civil and economic society, it might be really good to have some fundamental principles. So I asked John to come on today and just start talking about it. So before we started recording, I suggested that maybe the first question I'd ask of John is, what makes a great society? What makes an effective economic system for the majority of people with no particular population being dramatically disadvantaged? So, how about taking that on, John?
All right, I'll take it on. I still have as an economist with a Ph.D. in studying and a lot of years of experience, I haven't found any better blueprint for the kind of society you're talking about than going back to the foundational principles of this country and the Declaration of Independence. You know, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men, it should have said, all people are created equal and they're endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. Among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then when the Constitution, some years later, when they come around to the Constitution, it's still the Constitution of the United States, it starts off saying, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, provide for domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and ensure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity do ordain this Constitution. It says that's the basic purpose of government. And then the Declaration of Independence is kind of the foundational principles. So if we want to create an economy then that reflects that sort of foundational principles of the country, I think we would come up with something that would be a mix of what some people would call socialist. It wouldn't be socialism in the sense that you would have private property, private ownership of property, whereas it'd be public ownership within socialism. But it'd be private ownership of property, but you would have the government involved in some way in the allocation of the benefit of the economy, but still at the same time, most of the economy would function in a capitalist economy where you'd have a free market sector that would be working effectively. So I think the foundational principles is that the government is the one that has to ensure the rights, because when I was quoting from the Declaration of Independence, it says to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, which says that's the basic purpose of government. So the economy then provides sort of the means by which government can function in a way that ensures that the basic needs of people are met, which is those rights. If you're going to have a right to pursue happiness, life, liberty, and happiness, you have to have those basic needs met for food, clothing, shelter, healthcare, education, and this sort of thing. So the economy provides the means by which the government can carry out and ensure that everyone has the essentials that they need for a desirable quality of life. But once those basic needs are met, then the economy can function where some people have more than others and so on. You know, some of us are created and have opportunities to develop the ability to earn a lot of money in a lifetime, if that's what we choose to do. That's our particular talent. Other people are born with or acquire the aptitude and ability to be more caretakers of society as a whole, caretakers of family, and investing in community and in public service and things of this nature that doesn't earn high salaries or doesn't accumulate a lot of wealth, but still makes major contributions to society as a whole. So I think that, we need to look at what it is that we individually have to offer. And if it happens to be in terms of economic well-being, then, we generate a lot of income and wealth, then we need to give back to society in terms of those people that are doing things that don't generate a lot of income or wealth, that makes it possible for us to have a society and have an economy where we can accumulate, we can earn an income and we can accumulate wealth. And at the same time, the people that are being supported and doing things for the good of society as a whole need to recognize that in some cases people are going to have more money rather than less money, but that everybody's needs are basically being met. So it's just a very shorthand kind of sketch of what I see as the kind of economy and the kind of society that it would need to function in a way that met the needs of everyone. We can talk about practical things such as taxation, and we can talk about practical things such as Social Security and Medicare and how they all fit into that. But I think we need a framework that basically says we need to ensure the basic rights of people to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But we need to have an economy then that's capable of doing that. And the people that are good at making money need to be rewarded, but the people that are supporting society need to be appreciated and rewarded as well.
And I think that's a key point, isn't it? That if you have a society where the only metric is money, and therefore the more money you have, the more meritorious you are. And there's an equivalency between wealth and merit. And as you point out, if a person's talent is capital accumulation and business acumen, yeah, you're gonna have a whole lot more money than the average person. On the other hand, if you have a child, wouldn't you want that child to have an absolutely first-class kindergarten teacher? Or wouldn't you want to have your garbage picked up by someone who isn't strewing the garbage all over the street, who's paying attention to their job? It's always struck me that if we keep the wholeness of society in our view and look at all of the pieces, just like nature has an infinitude of pieces. Some are humble, some are grand, some are ants, some are lions. There's mountains, but there's also molehills. There's a lot that goes into any system, and you can't really fruitfully pull any of those pieces out, or the whole thing unravels. So, what is it about the particular mindset that has come to, I think, disadvantage us, in my view, in our country, about wealth being the only measure of value, and just the fundamental needs of people, so they can be peaceful, so they can be contributing, so they contribute what they can. Talk to us about that. Where do the value systems fit in, and then specifically policy wise do you do in order to affect that?
Yeah. Well, I think in this country and probably all over the world, there's always been this kind of tension between these two different views. But particularly in this country, if you look back historically, they talk about Hamilton and Jefferson and things like this. But it's kind of the enterprise ethic, as one writer, historian, economic historian, called it, the enterprise ethic. Basically, you're worth what you can earn in the marketplace. The market is the determiner of your basic worth. And if you're not able to earn enough to make a decent living, it means you're not working hard enough, or you don't want to work hard enough, or you haven't done the right things to get the ability to earn money or something, and you're just not as worthy as those people that earn more. And then there on the other side, there's the democratic sort of ethic, which I quoted, that we're all of equal inherent worth. And people tend to look at those two different views, which have always been there, versus the individual versus society and things of that nature. And I think the problem that we have is we want to go one way or the other. If I start about, meeting the basic needs for education, healthcare, things of this nature, housing and food and so on. They say, well, you're a socialist, you're a communist or something. They want to go all the way of saying that in socialism, it says everybody has an equal right to everything, basically, and the government owns the property and decides who gets what and so on, so that everybody gets everything. And then on the other side, if you talk about a free market economy, then other people say, well, you're just a capitalist, you're not. I wrote the first book I published was called Sustainable Capitalism. And people argue on both sides. Well, you're just trying to make excuses for capitalism. No, you're a socialist. I want to put you one way or the other. In reality, all governments are kind of a mixture of those two, like we've talked about before. And the key thing is to get people to look at striking the balance between those two, as opposed to saying it should be all about this, that you're only worth what you can earn, and those people that have more money are obviously smarter, and those are the people that ought to be running government, and those are the people that ought to be telling everybody else what to do. And then the people on the other side, no, we're all of equal inherent worth. Everybody has an equal say. Everybody ought to have the same amount of money. And you got to get a mix between those two. And I think if you look historically in this country, we've taken swings to one way, and then we come back to the other, and the swings the other way, and then we come back in the other direction. I think one of the problems that we have today is that we've allowed the corporate world, the large publicly traded corporations, we've allowed them since the 1980s. Basically, we haven't enforced antitrust policy in terms of size. If you can produce it cheaper, it doesn't matter how big you are, you can consolidate and whatever. That's basically where we are. And the fundamental difference now is with that economic power comes political power to influence elections, and we've allowed that so that, I don't remember what this last election for a judge in Wisconsin was about, but it's about millions of dollars for
north of $100 million.
So you get into this where you have the corporate, and the thing is different. If you've got a family corporation or a closely held corporation, then you can reflect sort of the social and ethical values of the family or the individual through that corporation. And ultimately, this whole business of meeting the needs of all, ensuring that everybody's basic needs are met, including those of future generations, that's ultimately an ethical or moral kind of decision. There's no economic benefit in doing something for the sole benefit of somebody else, and certainly not for somebody of the future. So that's a sort of the ethics kind of pulls you back, and the economics kind of pulls you in the other way. Economics is not ethics. It's about the pursuit of individual self-interest. It's a reflection of that part of us that is selfish, but there's also a part of us that's social, and there's a part of us that's moral, and so on. And so the difference is when you get in a large publicly traded corporation, the people that own stock in that corporation work in it may be just as ethical or moral as anybody else, but they have a responsibility to serve the common interest of the shareholders of that corporation. And if you talk about the common interest of the shareholders, they're all different political persuasions, different political parties. They're scattered around the world. There are different religions, different age groups in terms of how close they are to retirement or whatever they're doing. The only thing they have in common is the desire to increase the value of that stock or increase the economic return from the stock. And so now you have a purely economic entity that's participating in and dominating the political decisions, which are ultimately social and ethical kinds of decisions in terms of we decide then what kind of society we want and how we want people to be treated differently than they'd be treated by the economy. If you're simply willing to accept the economic outcome, then you just do away with government and let everybody do whatever they want to. So when we got to the point where I think there would have been a swing back after the Reagan era was a swing toward the right, where people were saying, okay, it's more about self-worth, cut welfare programs, even under the Democratic administrations. Clinton administration did more in terms of cutting back on welfare and things of that nature than the previous Bush administration had done, or even Reagan administration. So I think when we got to the point where we were coming in like to the 21st century, we were at a point where historically we would have had to shift back to the right, and that would have been sort of, I mean, to the left, and that would have been sort of the Obama administration. I think that's when people were ready to move that direction. But the country didn't move that direction policy-wise because now it was so dominated by the corporate economic interests, the purely economic entities were driving the policy decisions under Democrats and Republicans that gained so much power that we couldn't have sort of the natural adjustment to go back and swing back toward the left from the right. And so the economic forces then continue to push us further and further to the right until you end up where we are today. And it's not that we want to go to socialism or communism or anything like that, but we're at a point where I would argue that we're putting way too much priority on what you said, just economic growth, economic measures is all we talk about. We have elections coming up, you know, it says everybody's going to vote just based on the economy. Whoever thinks we got to, you know, whoever's going to give us the strongest economy, who's going to make the stock market grow, who's going to grow the GDP. That shouldn't be, that should be one part of the political discussion, but only one part. Who's going to restore equity and justice within society? Who's going to ensure that the rights of all people are basically met in the country? Who's going to ensure that we don't abandon the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence?
Yeah, well, I think that those are all really, really such cogent points. And you wrote a piece saying that opposing the current administration doesn't mean that you're all in favor of everything that happens in the other party.
Right.
I think this discussion has fairly demonstrated that in everything in life, it's neither this nor that. It's always a tension. I mean, as I have observed sometimes, are we our brother's keepers? Well, according to the good book, yes, we are.
Right.
We absolutely our own responsibility. Yes, we absolutely are. So
Yeah.
we are absolutely our brother's keepers. We are absolutely our own responsibility. So it's always struck me that there is a wise balance between
Right.
those two inherently opposing.
Right.
We take care of the people, we take care of ourselves. And
Yeah.
so, you know, as we kind of finish this discussion, we'll have more.
Okay.
What kinds of economic policies and tax policies and general, governmental policies around the world? I know I've read that, perennially the Nordic countries are among the happiest and all the happiness indices. On the other hand, they have small, rather homogeneous population
Right.
compared to our big, fractious, huge population in the US and in India and places like that. So thinking practically speaking, when people start thinking about, okay, what policy should we advocate for our legislators,
Right.
statewide, national? What should we be for?
Right. Well, I think some of the places that we need to go, and we talk about the Democrats and Republicans, I personally think that the Biden administration was headed in the right direction, but it didn't move fast enough, decisive enough that the people understood where you're going. But one of the things they had just started on, which I think is a top priority based on our previous discussion, is to enforce antitrust laws. This whole idea that it doesn't matter, how big the corporation is or what share of the market they have, as long as the prices are going down and you're getting a variety of quality products. That's not sound economic theory either. It says, okay, you may be getting the cheapest stuff, but it's not assuring you're getting the right stuff. If you want the invisible hand of Adam Smith to work, there has to be a large number of individual independent producers so that those with better ideas can gain access to the market and people have a choice, real choice among alternatives so that they can choose and pick. And you can't have anyone so large that they can keep people with better ideas out of the market. You have to have freedom of entry and exit. You have to have good consumer information. So when you're making decisions about something that's going to have future benefits, you have a good idea of what you're going to receive from it. We don't have any of those things. We have the concentration of the market, control of any areas, You have people, planned obsolescence. They only produce something that will last long enough to, convince you to buy another one when it comes out, but not to
Yeah.
last
Yeah.
forever. Advertising to persuade people to buy things they don't want and don't need. So we don't have those things. And the only way you can have the market to work so that people get what they want or what they need and what they want is if you have a large number of small enough firms so that no one of those firms can significantly influence overall prices or quantity. And that's just sound economic theory that we basically ignored. And so I said, so we need to enforce trust. And the other thing is we need to get money out of politics. This whole idea that money is equivalent to speech just doesn't make any sense. It goes back to the Supreme Court judges obviously, didn't read or I don't agree with, what I was saying a while ago. A corporation, a large corporation, is a purely economic entity. When we participate in the political process as citizens, we have economic interests, but we're also social and ethical and moral beings. And participating in government is more about our responsibility to society, our responsibility to the future of humanity, than it is about economics. And so they've said you can just use all the money, which is purely an economic measure, to influence politics. We need to get rid of that whole concept. And then the other one I think is tremendously important. We need to understand that in the long run, nobody gains when you have this disparity in income and wealth to the extent that it is now. We're back pretty much in line where we were, kind of what's called the Gilded Age of the late 1800s, early 1900s, and that was not sustainable. Eventually, it led to the Great Depression because what we have now, and I think maybe my next subtract blog post may be on that, is why do people that have so much feel like they have so little? Because we're among the most affluent society in the world, and yet people feel like they're really being deprived. And a big part of that is the inequity, because some people have so little in relation to other people that have so much. And then we've gone through a long period of time now where the whole segment of the population has not benefited or has benefited only marginally, where another small segment of the population has gone through the sky. I just saw a study, it was done by one of the, I can't remember now, one of the big think tanks, but they put together and looked at the statistics and said if you had the same sort of distribution of income now, income and wealth now that we had in the 60s, I think it was the 60s and 70s, that the median family income would be twice of what it is today. In other words, the opportunity to double the median family income was far gone, so that the top 10% or 1% or 0.1% could accumulate wealth. And so we have to recognize that even though there's nothing wrong with having a distribution of wealth based on what people are contributing and something and things of that nature, that there is a limit to which you can have this great disparity of income, and for it to be sustainable over the long run, but that you're creating a society in which people feel like they're deprived and they feel poor even though they're living in a plenty. So we need to work on that. And then another thing that's just come to my mind recently that is the amount of people that we have. They're really, I read this book by the progressive millionaires. They was talking about taxing, but so I hadn't gone into the tax of it. But the people that are really the wealthiest at the top areas of wealth, their money is making money far faster than they could possibly spend it, and they're not doing anything
Right.
to make the money, and that we tax the money made by money far less than we tax the money made by working people, and that's just crazy. Tax
Crazy.
policy.
Yeah.
So there's some basic sort of economic related things that I think that we could really focus on and begin to change policy and change direction. I think the thing about the when they bring up about the election, I wrote right after the election came out, I wrote a piece that posted on Facebook. I said, it's not a landslide, but it's a vote of no confidence. And I think that's what it was. I think the American people in general have lost confidence in both the mainstream Republican and the mainstream Democratic parties. And I think they were voting for change. I think part of this loss in confidence was intentional. I think the big corporations wanted to disable government because government's the only thing that can control them. And there were a lot of rich people that wanted to do the same thing. But anyway, so it was the people were so desperate for change, they were willing to vote for almost anybody that they thought would give them change. And
Up, yeah.
they looked at the Democratic campaign and said, I don't think the Democrats are going to change much from what they've done before, and I want change. I think it was a mistake, but that's my opinion.
Yeah. Well, John, this is a terrific discussion. I think we'll leave it at this for today. But if you would mind coming back, I think
Sure.
take any of these points and drill down. I quote you on this because I really believe it. And you said, money is important,
Right.
but not everything of value can be denominated in money.
The statistics, I call them the statistics on happiness, indicate that same thing, that beyond a relatively modest level of income, globally, it's around $20,000. It takes more than that in this country because we buy everything. We don't make anything for ourselves. But beyond some modest level of income, there's really no relationship with greater happiness and satisfaction. It's about the quality of our relationships within families, within communities, among friendships, and the some sense of purpose and meaning in life, the sense that what we're doing is right and good, that we're making some positive contribution. So money provides that foundation. It's the means, but what makes life worth living are things beyond the money.
Well, on that beautiful thought, Dr. John Ikerd, thank you very much for
Thank
spending time
you.
with me, and we'll be back.
All right, very good.